Hey there, it's me, Katie-Beth again. And despite my wintry outfit, spring and Mother's Day are both coming up soon. And in this video, I'll show you a quick tutorial on how to make the classic Mother's Day pin flower pots. Just quickly showing you, this is the one that I'm using in my study right now. I've got my pins, my permanent markers, and my scissors in there. They just kind of fit nicely. The one for my stepdaughter's room, she actually has washable markers instead of pins. In case they get on the wall, we can wash them away. And then this is the one I'm actually giving my own mother for Mother's Day. Her favorite flower is yellow roses. So Mom, if you're watching this, sorry for spoiling part of your surprise. This will be part of your Mother's Day gift. Alright everyone, so keep watching and I'll give you a quick video on how to make these for your mom. So start with gathering your main supplies. I have pins and markers, floral tape, which I got from the dollar store, it was pretty cheap, and then whatever flowers you want. I have some flowers from the dollar store and some flowers from Michael's. Next, you're going to want to find your flower pots. I actually found the best deal on them was at Walmart. They're about 77 cents each. They also sell them at Joann's and Michael's. They're just a little more expensive. So I needed to cover the hole at the bottom of the pot because I'm going to fill it with beans and I didn't want them to fall out. So I just used the tag and took it off the bottom and stuck it over that hole. The spray painting I recommend doing outside because it does get a little smelly. Just spray paint it with whatever color you want, both on the outside and on the inside. Now for the one that I put glitter on, I put masking tape around the edge that I didn't want to get the glitter and glue on. I used Mod Podge as my gluing solution and spread it all around there. And I actually had to do it in layers, so I had to let layers dry, just to get the coverage that I really wanted on that. So here I am just smearing the Mod Podge on. And first I start with pouring the glitter on, just kind of sprinkling it on. But that doesn't actually work great for getting an even coverage, so after I had a nice pile of glitter of leftovers on the bottom, I just kind of rolled it. And rolling the pot actually gives it a pretty even coat, but still I still had to do a few more layers after that. And of course, always save your unused glitter. I just pour mine right back in there so I can use it again. Now the next part turned out to be more difficult than I thought it would be. I thought I'd be able to just pull off the masking tape and have a nice clean edge, but because of the many layers of glue that I put on, it was kind of crusty and uneven taking it off. And I thought I had a pretty good solution to how to fix these jagged edges. In my head, I thought I would just sand down the edges a little better after I tried tearing them off and they didn't quite get as nicely as I wanted, still pretty jagged. The problem with sanding it off is that it ended up scratching the paint that I had already put on there and leaving scratch marks. So I realized that was a pretty bad idea and moved on to my next idea, which was just using an X-Acto knife to cut off the extra layer that I didn't need, those edges there. And it actually turned out to be a pretty good idea. I got a pretty sharp cut on that. Well, of course there was just little pieces I had to peel off, but it was still a lot better than what I originally had. So moving on, the next type of pot I did was a painted pot. This is the one I did for my mother. I actually painted little flowers on. The tip I can give you for this one is do thin layers. You will have to go back over and paint it again, but when you do thick layers and leave it there to dry, it will actually drip down and mess up your picture. So again, thin layers and just go back again and paint over them. Next, start making the flower pins. So you just break off the stem to the length that you want it. They're actually a lot harder to break off than I thought they would. I did some cuts and a lot of bends, and eventually just had to keep bending until I was able to pull it off. Also, I found that you could reuse the leaves on them and put them onto the flower to make them a little more flowery and pretty. So I made these in a few different ways. The first way, I just grabbed the stem of the flower, measured it up on the pin, and then grabbed the floral tape and just start wrapping it around. Try to cover the top part so you don't have the top of the pin showing. Cover that with the floral tape. And then you just keep spinning the tape all the way around the pin until you get to the bottom part, making sure that it's wrapped around high enough that you can still take the lid off and put it back on. And then you wrap it all the way back up, making sure there's a nice layer. And then you can just rip it off. And then you press down hard on the floral tape to make sure it sticks. And there you go. You just take the cap on and off. And then you have your first flower pin. So next I went to the more expensive flowers that I had from Michael's. I pulled them off of their stems, which is a little easier than trying to break the stem. These ones are littler, so I was able to double up more than one flower on one pin. I decided on this one, since I didn't really have a stem on it, that it'd be a good idea to use a glue gun. So I got my glue gun started, glued it on there, and then I take the flower and the leaves and I glue them onto the pin. It takes a few minutes to dry, let it dry completely. So before adding the next flower on, I actually decided to cover the top of the pin first, so that it would be a little easier to have the coverage versus if I had the two flowers already glued on there. So I just wrap it around there, give it a little coverage. Then I grabbed my glue gun and glued where I wanted the next flower to go. Stuck it on there, give it a little pressure, let it dry for just a bit. And then I grabbed more floral tape and wrapped it around. So I had the slight fear that at some time the pin might unravel, so I wanted to make sure that I had a nice thick layer so that if some of the floral tape did end up unraveling, there'd still be lots to cover. There would still be lots covered, so you could just rip it off and it would still be fine. It took a little while, but I got the coverage that I wanted, making sure all of the pin was covered by just twisting it around there. And then voila, our next flower pin is done and our first two are complete. And I don't want you to get too bored, but I did want to show you the other way of making the flower pins. I actually went to flower markers and I got them at the dollar store. So one tip that I can give you if you do buy cheap markers like I did, make sure that you test them out to make sure that they all work. So I went ahead here and tested all the markers, and fortunately they did all work really well. So I was pretty happy with that, but make sure you test them before you go through the work of decorating all these pins. Now because the markers are so much thicker than the pins, I didn't want to just put the flower on the side and have it weirdly to the side instead of over the top. So I actually went ahead and bent the stem a little so that it would fit nicely over the pin or over the marker and still be right on top and not on the side. So there's a little bend that I made. I also decided that I did want to glue it on to give it that stronger hold. Now I'm just going to speed this up a little to give you a quicker view of what's happening. So after I glued it on, I went ahead and wrapped it on there, getting all of the marker covered. Nice coverage there. Now the one thing I did want to remind you about is that the size of the marker may be different than the pen, so like here I ended up having to trim it down a little more. The other thing to note is that because the stem is also pretty thick hanging off of the marker, I actually went ahead and wrapped it a little extra, more than I normally would, and I also put a little glue at the bottom of the stem so that I wouldn't have a sharp point. And as you can see, the marker actually turned out pretty well. So the next one, instead of doing the stem, because I had all those stem issues, I actually just went ahead and glued the flower onto the top. So one more tip that I wanted to give you, some of the cheaper flowers that I got from the dollar store were kind of smashed and the petals are falling down. So I actually kind of just took my glue gun and glued those petals up to higher petals. See, it keeps falling. I just got some glue, glued it on there, and then it stays up with the rest of the flower. So that's one way to fix cheaper flowers if you do end up getting cheaper flowers. And here is my set of markers. They actually came out pretty well, and I'm actually pretty excited to give them to my stepdaughter. So now I'm going to show you how I filled the pots with the beans so that it's more like sand and the pins can just go right in there. I have a 2-pound bag of beans that I got at Walmart. It was like $2. So I just slightly pour them in there, fill it up, and then you can stick the pins in. And here I go, filling up my mother's pin holder. This was actually a pretty fun project to make. I hope you guys enjoy it too. Once again, thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe.